Hi, everybody. Welcome again to IV English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today we have an article for you, and today's a special day. It's 11/11, November 11th.
Why is that special to you?
Well, it's all ones. There's no all twos.
It's a very binary number.
Yeah, 好，这个数字很有趣，1111啊，非常的这个 binary， 就是二元的，好，两个都是一。
Okay, our topic, however, is a bit more serious. It is depressed. The solution is human connection.
中文标题是解忧良方，与人互动。
All right, I'll read through the article, and then, as usual, we'll go back, and each and every sentence will come under our microscope so that we can analyze it and let you know how to improve your English. Johan Hari understands depression. He has written 2 books on the subject, and he has dealt with depression and antidepressants for much of his adult life. He shares some of the insights he has picked up along the way in his TED Talk, This Could Be Why You're Depressed or Anxious. Hari notes that if someone is depressed or anxious, it is not because they are weak or broken, but because they are a human whose needs are unmet. To illustrate this, he tells a story about a Cambodian farmer that suffered from depression after losing his leg while working. The doctors didn't prescribe him medication, nor did they send him back to work in the fields. Instead, they made him a dairy farmer. Soon after, the man's depression improved. This anecdote also offers another observation about depression. The problem may not always be within ourselves, but in the way we live. If drugs were the solution, then rates of depression in the U.S. and Europe would not be on the rise. This is because, as a society, people are lonelier than ever. Hari mentions another story. This one is about a woman in London who had severe depression and anxiety. One day, her doctor asked her to come to the clinic twice a week to meet with other people. It wasn't a meeting for people to talk about their problems, but a place where the group could work together on a goal, any goal. They built a garden and looked out for each other, and soon their conditions began to improve. This type of treatment is called social prescribing. As Hari points out, the solution to depression isn't in fixing ourselves, but in connecting with others.
There's so much that's real in this article. It's really true. Johan Hari understands depression. This is a good way to begin an article. It's a short statement. It just said, this guy is an expert. We should listen to him.
好，所以开头非常简单有力啊，就说这个家伙呢懂，不是这个家伙，这位专家哈，他 understands， 他懂 depression， 懂忧郁这种东西。好 ，depression 这个字，这个字首啊 ，D 就是 down 的意思 ，press 就是压，所以你被压的往下压，那当然你就很无助、很忧郁嘛，哈，所以大家可以这样去背这个字 ，depression 就是忧郁的意思。
He has written 2 books on the subject.And he has dealt with depression and antidepressants for much of his adult life. So, if he understands depression, well, show me. Why do you say that? Well, he's written 2 books about it. And writing 1 book is hard enough. 2 books, you're either asking for trouble or you do know what you're talking about. And he has dealt with depression and antidepressants. This word refers to medicines which are in some way trying to help you feel better so that you don't feel lazy and weak and unhappy all the time. And he's worked with these, or maybe he was depressed himself and took antidepressants himself for much of his adult life. That would mean to me at least half of his age over 20. He is quite familiar personally with the subject of depression.
所以呢，我们怎么说他懂忧郁呢？因为他写了2本书 ，has written 2 books on the subject. On 一本书后面用 on 的话，表示是专书讨论这个 subject 啊，所以他写了2本书专门讨论这个 depression 这个 subject。然后呢 ，he has dealt with 他这个一直研究、一直处理这个 depression 这个忧郁症，还有呢这个抗忧郁药物哈 ，anti 就是抗或者反的意思。那antidepressants 就是抗忧郁的药物。那他做这些事情做多久了呢？For much of his adult life， 做的是他成年之后大多数的时间都在做这个方面的东西，所以他就是一个专家。
He shares some of the insights he has picked up along the way in his TED Talk. This could be why you're depressed or anxious. So the insights means the things that he's learned, that he's picked up along the way, that he's learned through the process. And the name of his TED Talk is This Could Be. This meaning what he's going to talk about could be why you're depressed or anxious.
好，我们看到说he shares 他分享 some of the insights 就是见解啊，通常 insights 我们把它翻成真知灼见啊。那 insight 这个字它的字根很有趣啊，这个 insight 它本来的意思是 sight with the eyes of the mind，就是用你心里面的那个眼睛啊，在内部的那个眼睛所看到的东西啊，所以是见解，是个真知灼见。那这个 insight 是怎么样 ？He has picked up， 他这个得到的，这个 pick up 在这里是得到的意思啊。他得到了这些 insights， 在哪里得到或者什么时候得到的呢？是 along the way， 就一路走来。因为前面讲嘛 ，much of his adult life， 他成年之后大多数时间都在研究这个事情，所以他一路走来，他得到了一些 insights， 他拿来跟大家分享，在他的这个 TED Talk 里面分享。那 TED Talk 的这个题目就是这可能是你忧郁或焦虑的原因啊，所以 this could be 就可能是 why you're depressed， 你可能这样因为很忧郁，或者anxious 就是焦虑的意思。好，那这个 anxious 这个字，其实它的这个字根其实跟 anxiety 是同一个字。好，那其实 anxious 这个 an 啊，它的字头是 ang 变出来的。那 ang 是很大的痛苦或者 choke 啊，几乎要被这个勒的没有气那种感觉，窒息的感觉。这个字呢，它跟 anger 大家这样一起记，它跟 anger 那个字根是一样的 ，anger。是愤怒嘛，因为你气得很难过，好，所以 anxious, anger 它们字根是一样的。
Hari notes that if someone is depressed or anxious, it is not because they are weak or broken, but because they are a human whose needs are unmet. So in his study, in his research, Hari notes that he makes a point in his TED Talk and probably in his books that depressed people are not weak or broken people, as sometimes other people like to think of them as, but it's very simple. Anyone could become depressed or anxious whose needs are unmet. If they always feel they're missing something, lacking something, they're not good enough for others, and so on.
They're not getting what they need.
Exactly. Their needs are unmet. They're not getting what they need.
OK， 所以那个Harry 他 notes 他这个指出，好，他写到，他说 ，If someone is depressed or anxious， 如果有人忧郁或者是很这个焦虑的话呢 ，it is not because 不是因为 they are weak， 不是因为他们很这个弱啊，或者是 broken 其实接近我们讲的精神崩溃啊，绝望 ，having given up all hope 啊，或者是这个 shattered in spirit 啊，你的精神上面被打散掉了，所以这叫 broken 啊，所以不是因为他们这个非常的软弱 weak 软弱，或者是他们这个崩溃的，而是因为 but because they are a human， 他们是一个人啊 ，human 在这里指就是一个人 whose needs 这个人他的需求是 are unmet 就是 not satisfied or fulfilled 啊，我们常常讲 unmet demands， 所以他的需求没有得到满足啊，所以他才会觉得很忧郁，才会觉得很这个焦虑啊，而不是因为他们很软弱或者是这个精神崩溃了。
To illustrate this, to help the audience understand what he meant, he tells a story about a Cambodian farmer. This man suffered from depression after losing his leg while working. It's very easy to lose your leg in Cambodia because there's so much unexploded ordnance around. There's all these little tiny bombs that are scattered around and still live from the war from 30 years ago. So it's very easy to lose your leg.
Yeah, 好，所以呢 to illustrate this, 说明这一点，他要想说明这一点的话呢，或者为了要说明这一点，illustrate 就是说明的意思。那这个字它的字首那个 il 呢，就是 in， 就是 en 就是 to put into 的意思。那这个 lus lus， 各位看到 lus 这个字呢，都跟 bright 有关跟 light 有关。好像英文有个 luster 就是光的意思，光泽、光辉，lustre。所以在这里怎么样？就是 to put into light， 就是把它照亮，就是说明、讲清楚的意思。所以为了说明这一点，他讲了一个故事，关于一个柬埔寨的 farmer， 一个农夫他怎么样呢 ？suffered from depression， 他是因为忧郁而受苦那 suffer 这个字顺便讲一下它字根，这个 su 是 under 的意思FUR 是 carry 的意思，所以把它带到底下去，带到底下去，你当然很苦嘛。你在上面多快乐，被带到底下去就 suffer 了。所以呢 ，suffered from depression， 他因为忧郁受苦那或者觉得很难过，是为什么呢？是在他 losing his leg while working， 他在工作的时候呢，他的脚失去了脚那这个到底怎么回事呢？刚刚 Angel 老师有提到，其实像柬埔寨呢，它有很严重的问题，就是他当时在这个战争的时候呢，留下太多的地雷，还有未爆弹。那农夫耕田，他们在整地的时候，常常不小心就会踩到那个地雷，或者是碰到那个地雷，那很容易脚就炸断了。
The doctors didn't prescribe him medication. They did not give him medicine for his depression, nor did they send him back to work in the fields. They didn't say, well, if you just live the way you used to live, you're going to feel better about yourself.
Just try harder.Yeah,
on one leg.
Yeah. 所以呢，医生呢并没有 prescribe， 没有开药给他 prescribe him medication， 就是没有开药给他的意思。所以 prescribe medication 就是开药。好，那这个 prescribe pre 是 before 的意思，那 scribe 是 write， 所以先写好所以你先写好，你再拿这个去药房换药所以 scribe 就是 write 的意思。那类似一个字，各位可以一起背 describe 是描述，因为 d 就是 down 或者是 off 的意思把它写出来或者写下来叫做 describe。好，所以 prescribe 就是事先写好，那在这里就开药的意思。所以医生没有给他开药 ，nor did they， 他们也没有把他送回去工作 in the fields， 也没有说把他你这个腿炸断了，好，现在腿医好了，那你就回去工作吧，继续去种田吧。他们也没有这样做。
What did they do? Instead, they made him a dairy farmer. They found a way that he could continue to be useful in his life and still have a purpose.
Yeah, a dairy farmer 就是一个酪农，好，所以 instead 他们没有把他送回去继续种田，他们让他成为一个酪农。
Soon after, the man's depression improved. He finally had something similar, not exactly the same to do as before, and because he was working and producing milk and butter and cheese, whatever they used the milk for, he felt he had a purpose in life and he was doing something useful.
He probably has more interaction with other people.Yeah,
and he has interaction with them as an equal, not as somebody lame who has to be taken care of.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's working.
Yeah, 所以我们讲说他这个当了酪农呢，可能因为他变成一个有价值的人，而且他可能也跟别人有一些互动，而且这互动是平等的互动，因为他做酪农，他的脚并不是那么大的问题那所以他慢慢的 soon after， 不是慢慢的，很快他的 depression 就 improved， 他的忧郁症呢就改善了。
Now, this anecdote also offers another observation about depression. An observation is something that you can see, so it offers something else that we can see about depression.
好 this anecdote 这个字呢，就是我们讲轶事一个车一个诗那个轶事它就 a short entertaining story 通常是一个人或者一个 incident。 那这个字它的字根我们也可以讲讲，各位联想一下，也许可以帮你记得。这个 anecdote 这个 an 呢就是 not 的意思，就是否定的字头。那个后面那个ECDOTE 那一部分呢， 其实是 published 的意思，所以 anecdote 这个字原来的意思是 not published 没有公布的，所以叫做轶事嘛，就是我知道别人都不知道那叫做 not published。那这个 ECDOT 为什么是 published 呢？因为那个 E 是 out， 那后面那个 DOT 呢是 give 的意思。那这个很有趣，因为拉丁这个 anecdote 是希腊文来的，可是拉丁文里面也有一个 DO 也是给的意思，像 donation这个是拉丁文所以 anyway 这个很有趣的，拉丁文希腊文这个 DO 好像都跟给有关，所以 give out 就是 publish， 所以 not published not given out， 所以这个是轶事，这只有我知道，所以很有趣，因为我知道你们都不知道，所以我跟你讲这叫 anecdote。 好，所以这样的一个 anecdote， 这样的一件小小的一个故事呢，也 offers 也提供了另外一个 observation另外一种观察 about depression， 就是我们得到另外一种关于depression 的一些观察那这个 observation 这个 OB 是 over 的意思，那 serve 就是 watch， 所以 observation 就是 watch over， 它本来是 protect 的意思，那慢慢演变出来成为观察，因为你大概要保护人，你要好好观察他，看他在干什么才能保护他。
The problem may not always be within ourselves, but in the way we live. Many people feel there's something wrong with me, my mind is sick or something like this, but actually it's Mr. Hari feels it's in the way we live. If we live and have a purpose and we have friends, family around us, you are much less likely to be depressed than if you don't.
Yeah, 所以呢 the problem 这个地方是特定的，因为指的就是你之所以会忧郁的原因，或者你之所以会忧郁的问题在哪里所以是一个特定的，所以 the problem 这个问题呢 may not always be within ourselves， 这个问题呢也许并不是一定是在我们本身may not always be 就是 sometimes it may be， 但是it's not always所以不是永远在我们自己身上， but in the way we live， 而是我们生活的方式 the way we live。
If drugs were the solution, then rates of depression in the U.S. and Europe would not be on the rise. What this sentence is implying is that the U.S. and Europe take tons of drugs for depression, and yet the rate is rising. So if drugs were the solution, it wouldn't be true that we have more and more depression. So clearly we should stop taking drugs because it's not the thing that's helping.
Yeah. 好，所以呢，他这里讲说，那如果药物呢是解决方案的话，那么 rates of depression 就是忧郁症的比例，在美国在欧洲的忧郁症的比例呢不会 would not be on the rise， 不会一直往上升所以他这句话意思就是说，在欧美显然很多人这个因为忧郁症在服用药物，可是如果这些药真的有用的话呢，那这些忧郁症的人数就不会一直上升所以换句话说，这个药物不是解决的办法。
I just said we should stop taking drugs, but that's not necessarily true because drugs still do help,
yes.
But drugs are not the solution. It's like a temporary help while you figure your life out and while we figure our society out. Because I think that if your broader society is causing this kind of depression, the broader society has to change. Individual changes to their life are not going to happen if the structural problems are still there.
Yeah, 所以 structural problem 就是结构性的问题所以 Angel 老师在刚刚讲说，他讲的这个说明清楚一点，就是说并不是说如果有忧郁症的话你就马上停止吃药，不是这个意思而是说这个药不是根本的解决办法，或者药物不是根本的解决办法，那个人的改变其实也不见得有用，因为可能要整个社会某些观念可能要改变所以这个东西是需要大家一起努力的，但是这里至少在这里他提出了一个解决办法，就是等一下我们已经看到了，等一下也再看到，就是你要跟人家互动这可能是更重要的。
This is because as a society, people are lonelier than ever. Families break up and couples break up and so on. So your chance to feel alone are much higher than they used to be.
And we're separated by the way that we have one-person apartments and the way that people are watching TV instead of hanging out in groups, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 好，所以呢，他说 this is because 这是因为 as a society 我们整个的社会或者从社会这个角度来看呢 people are lonelier than ever 人们比以前还要更寂寞，所以整个社会的人都是这样子。
Hari mentions another story.
他有提到另外一个故事。
This one is about a woman in London who had severe depression and anxiety. We've moved from Cambodia to London, from a farmer to a woman.
好，所以呢，这个故事 this one 就是 this story 是关于一个在伦敦的一位妇女啊，那她有怎么样 severe 很严重的、很剧烈的 depression， 还有 anxiety.
From a man in the countryside to a woman in the city.
There you go.
Yeah.
So one day, her doctor asked her to come to the clinic twice a week to meet with other people, which is a pretty ordinary thing for therapists to ask you to do.
Yeah. 有一天呢，她的医生要她来到来诊所 twice a week， 一个礼拜来2次，来 meet with other people 那跟其他的人碰面。
It wasn't a meeting for people to talk about their problems. You've seen this 100,000 times on television programs where there's some psychiatrist or clubs that just come together and they sit in a circle in chairs and...
Group therapy.
There you go.
Yeah.
To get rid of drug problems or whatever. But...
That wasn't this kind of meeting.
That's right. It was a place where the group could work together on a goal, and this work is doing something...Any goal, and we have examples of that coming up.
那 it wasn't a meeting， 这不是一个会议 for people to talk about their problems， 不是说大家会面那大家来谈谈自己的问题那这个在英文里面叫做 group therapy 团体治疗，它不是一个团体治疗，而是怎么样 a place 这个地方呢 where the group 在这个地方这个团体的人呢 could work together， 他们可以一起努力。On a goal, you work on something， 就是你做这件事情，但他们是 together 一起做这件一起，希望能够得到一个 goal， 能够达成一个目标一个 goal， 而且是 any goal， 而且这目标不用是什么伟大的目标，是什么目标都可以，只要大家一起努力合作去达成这目标就可以了。
And so what their goal was is building a garden. They built a garden and looked out for each other, took care of each other. And soon their conditions began to improve. They had purpose and they had social connection.
Looked out for each other 就是彼此关照的意思Look out 在这里就 take care 或者是 to be watchful 会注意别人好不好这种感觉。所以他们这个 built 他们建造了一个花园，然后呢彼此关照。那 soon 很快的 their conditions 他们的状况呢就开始改善了 began to improve.
This type of treatment is called social prescribing.
那这种 treatment 这种治疗方法呢被称为 social prescribing， 就是社会处方或者是社交处方这个就是就是他们做这件事情靠社交来当做这个治疗方法。
And as Hari points out, the solution to depression isn't in fixing ourselves, because the problem is not in ourselves. The problem is that we're lacking connection with others, and so connecting with others will solve the problem.
好，那 as 某某某 points out 这个学术论文常常会讲到as 某某某 points out 就是你要引述他的论点的时候，你就会用这样的这个句型来介绍。所以正如他所说的，正如他所提出的the solution to depression， 注意那个介系词是 to the solution to depression 这个沮丧的解决之道 isn't in 并不在于in 是在哪里并不在于fixing ourselves， 不是说我们修理自己把自己这个有内心有什么问题把它处理好，并不在这里，这不是真正的 solution， 而是在 in connecting with others， 而是说你要跟别人有所联系有所连接，也就是你要跟别人互动的意思。
So if you don't want to feel depressed, join our program whenever you can. We're just a barrel of monkeys here, full of laughs, and we have a good time, and you can learn some English. Okay, until the next time we get together,
bye-bye.